A few weeks ago, I set my alarm for 5 a.m. Not because I planned some big resets, but that I watched a video that made me feel like this time would be different. The kind that actually leaves you convinced that you finally didn't figure it out. And so that night, I went to bed earlier than usual. The next morning, the alarm went off, and so I got up, made it to my desk, and almost immediately, something felt unfamiliar. Not the tiredness, not the routine itself, but every step felt strangely awkward, like I was borrowing it from someone else's morning instead of returning to the one that I already lived. And that confused me. Because a few months earlier, this wasn't new. At some point, I stopped being part of my life. And for the strange part, it doesn't want that I quit, but that I couldn't remember quitting. There wasn't a decision, there wasn't a final day, but somewhere between then and now, the routine had simply disappeared, and I never noticed it happening. The rest of that morning stayed with me, not because the routine had failed, but that I couldn't explain when it had stopped being my routine in the first place. Later that day, I sat down and tried to walk backwards. I expected to find something, maybe a missed alarm, maybe a difficult week, maybe a day where I consciously decided I'll start again on Monday. But the more I thought of it, the stranger it became. Because there wasn't a moment, it was just a long stretch of ordinary days. Days that looked completely normal while I was living in them. And somewhere inside that stretch, without announcing itself, the habit quietly stopped belonging to me. It didn't end with a decision, but it ended with enough small interruptions, skipped mornings, and delayed restarts that one day I looked up and realized I was remembering a routine instead of living one. The idea bothered me because if something that once felt automatic could disappear without noticing, then what else could? I have been thinking about that morning ever since. Not because I cared about the 5 a.m. routine itself, but because it made me realize that I misunderstood what quitting actually looks like. I'd always imagined myself quitting on something very obvious, like a decision, a moment where you say, okay, I'm done. But looking back, that's almost never how it happened to me. It usually started with a single day, not a dramatic one, but just an ordinary Tuesday where something came up. Maybe you slept a little longer, or I told myself that I would do it tomorrow instead. And tomorrow never felt like a problem because tomorrow still belonged to the version of me who did the habits. Missing one day doesn't feel like quitting, not at all. It just felt temporary. So does missing two, even three. Each day on its own feels too small to mean anything. And that's exactly why it's so difficult to notice. Because the habit isn't disappearing all at once. It's being replaced by a story. The story that you're still the kind of person who does this, even though you haven't actually done it for a while. The identity stays alive long after the behavior had quietly faded away. And because you still believe you'll start again tomorrow, nothing inside you ever sounds the alarm. There isn't a moment where you feel like you quit. There's just a growing distance between the person that you think you are and the things that you're actually doing. And by the time you finally notice that distance, the habit is already a memory. When I first noticed all of this, I reached for the explanation that I usually do. I needed a better system, something that could catch me earlier, a reminder, a weekly review, some way of noticing the drift before it actually became another thing I quietly stopped doing. And for a while, that felt like the obvious matter. Because if the habit could disappear without me noticing, then surely the solution was to build something that had noticed for me. But then I remember something. I already tried that. There have been a tracker, there have been a streak, there have been reminders that were supposed to stop exactly this from happening. And somehow they disappeared too. Not all at once, but just the same way everything else had. quietly. I realized that the tracker hadn't failed because I forgot to update it. I had stopped updating it because somewhere underneath, I already stopped being the person who actually reached for it. That was the part that I had been missing. The behavior wasn't disappearing first. The story was staying too long. And so in my head, I was still someone who woke up early, still someone who still exercised consistently, still someone who had a system. The identity was there, but the evidence wasn't. And because I kept believing that story, I never looked closely enough at what my days were actually saying. That is why no system caught it. It was watching my actions. The thing that had drifted first was the gap between the person I still was and the person that my habit quietly showed I had become. And so once I saw that, I stopped looking for the day the habit disappeared, because that wasn't the moment that mattered anymore. I started looking for something earlier, the point where I was still doing the habit, but I wasn't really in it anymore. And so when I went back those weeks, honestly, I noticed something that I completely missed at the time. The routine hadn't disappeared overnight, not at all, but for a while I was still technically there. The alarm still went off, I still got up some mornings, I still went through the emotions just enough to tell myself I hadn't really stopped. From the outside, it probably looked the same, but from the inside, something had already changed. I wasn't paying attention anymore. I wasn't present. I was just completing the outline of a routine I had already stopped believing in. And that's the part none of my system had ever got. Every tracker I'd used was waiting for the first missed day. But the missed days weren't the beginning, they were actually the ending. The beginning was much more quieter, and so it was the moment that the habit stopped feeling like something I was choosing and became something that I was simply performing, which is the version that actually slips past you. Because technically, you're still doing it. The boss six keep getting ticked. The streak stays alive, but the identity still survives. But all underneath that, the habit is already starting to disappear. Now, when something begins to drift, I don't ask myself, did I do it today? I ask myself, when I was doing it, was I actually there? Because the answer to that question keeps becoming not really. The skip days usually aren't far behind, and by the time those arrive, the real change has already happened. I'm not going to tell you this is easy to catch, because even now, knowing what to look for, I still find myself going through the motions, sometimes without noticing it until after. The difference is just that now I have a question to ask, and I ask it during the thing, not after it. Not did I do it today, but not how long is my streak. Just when I was doing that, was I actually there? And the honest answer to that question tells me more than any tracker will ever do. If the answer is yes, even imperfectly, even tiredly, the habit is still real. But if the answer keeps becoming not really, that's the signal. Not to panic, not to restart dramatically, but just to pay attention. Because the gap between the person you think you are and what your days are actually showing is still small enough to close. It won't be for long, but right now, it still is. But here's where this question led me. Once I started asking it honestly, it worked for the habit. So I started pointing it at other things. Not did I do this today, but is this actually working in a broader sense? And one evening, I actually pointed it something I'd been quietly avoiding for a long time. Not the habits, but the whole direction. Where is this heading? Where am I actually building toward? I expected a clear answer, but what I got instead was the most uncomfortable realization of the whole series, and the most useful one, which is what this next video is about.